And as president, I will never waver in defense of America's security and ideals, because in the enduring struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand and I know where the United States belongs.
Vice President Kamala Harris accepts the Democratic nomination for president.
Fox 5 political analyst Stephen Goggin from SDSU is joining us this morning. Stephen, good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get right to what you thought. How did the convention go, and what did you think of the speech last night?
So generally speaking, quite positive, right? We'll wait and obviously see what comes of the polling in the next few days and the next few weeks. But generally speaking, it was a convention, right, kind of centered around joy, enthusiasm, and a number of things, right, that many people would argue have been missing, right, in the last 10 years of politics or so. But generally speaking, it looked like a normal convention, right, not just, right, with Kamala Harris herself speaking and accepting the nomination, but trotting out, right, many of the surrogates we'll see on the campaign trail around the country, people running for House and Senate seats, right, and kind of selling not just a single candidate, but the party, right, as well as her obviously vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz. So it looked right like a pretty typical convention. We'll see the impact as it comes, but no major gaffes or faults or other things that would likely make news.
You say normal, you say typical convention. Was there anything that she said last night that stood out to you?
Also, some things. We're in a really interesting situation this cycle, obviously not just because of the events of the past few months, right, with Biden stepping aside and other things, but as vice president, right, she has the record, the campaign, right, of kind of the incumbent president, even though she's obviously the vice president. And so she has the record to run on to talk about the accomplishments and the other things and what might continue, but she also has some play, some distance there, right? We don't usually see this. We saw it in 2000, we see it in 88, where she can distance herself from things that people may not look positively upon the current administration. She's also running against, right, a former president, which is uncommon. And so she's effectively, in some ways, kind of in her speech and talking about the negative aspects of Donald Trump last night, kind of flipping it a little bit and talking about him as president, right? It's kind of running against, right, kind of what people might expect and what people know quite well. So that is a bit unusual. Many aspects of the speech are quite common, telling her personal story, right, and how she grew up, very, things we see from presidential candidates like that. But, kind of the situation created a unique environment, a little bit less so her speech.
Were you surprised they went after Trump as much as they did, whereas before it seemed like the strategy was, let's not even mention his name, and now they went all in on talking about him, saying Donald Trump many, many times, and again, pointing to his 4 years as president, what he's done since, the Supreme Court appointment, et cetera, et cetera. Was that the right strategy? Finally to say, this is the guy we're going against?
It's a strategy, right? You could imagine playing it differently.
Sure.
One of the things we've seen in the past 4 years or so is Donald Trump's approval has kind of slowly crept up a little bit as he's kind of faded from memory of many people a little bit. And so reminding people about his presidency, about negative aspects that they might want, is something that seemed kind of very obviously deliberate in creating that contrast between the two candidates. In discussing that, obviously, she's campaigning on, right, her own positive image and things that she wants to do there as well. But obviously, as you noted, right, throughout not just her speech, but throughout the entire convention, many speakers drawing direct contrasts there. Many people know Trump quite well. He's been in the news, obviously, pretty continuously for the past decade. And so there's arguably less movement or able to make movement around kind of opinion of him, where there's more movement to make, right, upon her image, given, right, even though she's currently vice president, there's more room to move there. And so I think a lot of the negativity towards him was less in service of just being negative, but more in contrasting, right, her vision and her arguments and policy and personality with his.
There really isn't much time left until the election, and many candidates over the years, they've had quite a bit of time running up into it for her, just several months. So what does she need to do now over the next 2 months? What's next?
Right, it's a really good question. So she'll be visiting many of the battleground states around the country, right, deploying many of the people we saw at the convention as well, speaking in order to kind of create interest. Conventions are kind of a weird thing because you basically get the whole week, right, where everyone pays attention to you and pays attention to what you're doing. And now we're a little bit off to the races where there's the debates, there's Trump sentencing in mid-September, and other events that are kind of bookmarked on the calendar.
But you ever had to say that kind of phrase before?
Not really, right? It's a little bit of a unique situation where you're trying to make make news, you're trying to make interest, you're trying to drive the message. And so we'll see lots of events kind of tailored and trying to create that news cycle for her. Of course, Trump as well will be trying to draw interest and and create the news cycle there.
Yeah.
I imagine in the immediate future, you kind of coast on the convention bump, you let this kind of settle in a little bit. So nothing big this weekend, I expect, or even leading into next week. Many people have discussed the short timeline thought to be a negative, but it's something actually, the enthusiasm, the momentum, the other stuff seems to be working well for the Harris campaign so far.
I think the energy of that crowd that the Democrats wanted paid off with the switch, if you will. And they got the convention they wanted. They got the attention they wanted. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about, there's been critiques on both sides that there's no substance in these speeches that they've been giving. It's like, okay, but what are you going to do? Okay, but what are you going to do? Okay, but what's your policy? It seemed last night that Kamala Harris addressed some of those hot button topics and offered ideas of what she would do, not in super detail, Israel-Hamas war, Ukraine, abortion. Was that something that the voters wanted, that delegates wanted to hear that? What is she going to do when she gets into office?
Absolutely. There's kind of this interesting tightrope you have to walk as a candidate, because people, if you don't talk about issues, people will say they want to hear about the issues. But if you go up there and you start, giving a 2-hour-long speech about your exact plan for everything, people also don't love that, right? And so her speech pretty clearly was tailored to, talk about some of the general issues, and offer some specifics, but not too many. I expect the campaign, through interviews, through policy statements, through other things, to be trotting out more of that in the coming weeks. But in actuality, the contrast with former President Trump there is something that they probably hope to capitalize on, given the kind of his talking about policy, his equivocations often in rallies and other things. So I don't know that they're going to nail down too many specifics more, but I expect them to appease people who want to hear those. Even though we expect her probably to campaign on many of the current administration's kind of successes and probably distance herself a little bit from things people might be frustrated with.
That debate 3 weeks away is going to be must-see TV, as they used to say.
I assume it'll happen. Yeah, it'll be a big deal, right? Yeah. We'll see how it goes, see if there are others as well.
All right. Stephen Goggin, we thank you again for the insight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.